Greetings and salutations, everybody. Happy Wednesday. It's a short week here for me, anyway. Pendragon. Pendragon is, gosh, it's one of those bucket list games for me. Always want to play it, always look at it longingly. I own a couple different versions of it. I own the great, what's it called? The Great Pendragon Cycle, which I should pull out, I think. I've always looked at it longingly, lovingly from across the room, but it hasn't happened for me yet. But as I was going down a bit of a rabbit hole, since Chaosium has put some stuff, you may have seen I've posted some shorts just mentioning that on Drive Through RPG right now, Chaosium has a few of their books that are pretty good sale prices, 99 cents for both their basic role playing core book and also I think it was is it Rune Quest starter set, which I think normally the starter set anyway, I think is 15 bucks and it's on sale for 99 cents. And as I was scrolling around to see, well, gee, what else does Chaosium have on drive through that I haven't been aware of? Up popped Pendragon Quick Start, which I eagerly, as you can see, jumped on it and downloaded it. Pendragon was I guess the what is it, the creation of the late Greg Stafford. Let's get into it. I'm really curious how they're going to do this. I notice here I don't know if it's subtitles the right word, but it's called The Adventure of the Sword Tournament, a quick start scenario. I'm presuming, I haven't looked at it yet. We're going to look at it together. I'm presuming we're going to get some version of the core rules and mechanics, maybe some kind of character creation, and then I guess there's some kind of scenario. I don't know. We'll see. I would love my goal for this. It would be something that I feel like I could play in some kind of one shot. Maybe I could set something up because I would love to do this, run this, be a part of it somehow. Well, let's see what they've got for us, and then we can go from there. Welcome to this special preview of the Pendragon 6th edition starter set that was released. Oh, okay. This is pretty recent. Released for Gen Con 2022. Greg Stafford started work on the new edition 10 years ago. Since that time, it has gone through multiple development phases and is at last nearly ready for its public debut. He called this and always intended it to be his quote unquote ultimate edition, and we are proud to see it finally coming to fruition. Veterans will find that the fundamentals of the game remain the same, with subtle modifications reflecting the culmination of nearly 3 decades refinement of Greg's vision of Arthurian fantasy. For newcomers, welcome. Everything you need to experience the Pendragon system is here. The core rules, a scenario playable in a single session, and 5 pre-generated characters. Hey, Stochastic Agency. And if you notice, I've tried this. I'm going to try to see how this works. I've got the chat now popping up over here. We'll see how folks like it. I go back and forth between wanting to have or thinking that it's worthwhile having the chat up and then not. So let me know what you guys think. I know on YouTube now, depending on how you're watching it, you can pull up the chat window. I know I can do it on the website, and I think even on my TV I can do it. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll try. I'm trying it out. I'm gonna see how I like it. You guys, let me know. Let me know if you're watching this later and you're coming to it off stream, if it's worthwhile having the chat comments up or not. I leave it to you. All right, back to this. Stochastic Agent says definitely not a hack and slash game. No. This is now I know from having read through the full rules a lot. There's a lot of it definitely has some elements that are, you could call it Excel spreadsheet the game. But that's never deterred me. I mean, I really do like Arthurian kind of fantasy, and I really like this take on it. Really going head on into the chivalry instead of sort of dancing around the edges. I think a lot of games, including kind of D&D, do. Where you'll hint at it with alignment, and they'll kind of throw some bones towards being like, a paladin, maybe being somebody with a code, but they don't really go into it. Whereas I always felt like Pendragon from reading it, just no, we're going full bore into this Arthurian fantasy. And then Ian says, "Will Pendragon pull the sword from the stone and become the new king of RPGs?" Let's find out. Ian, you could be a staff writer over here. And Ian says, "It's a great exploration of knighthood." Yes, I think so. With a lot of the kind of details and fun stuff, and you can really build a dynasty out of it. I think if you're someone who those like Crusader Kings and those Paradox interactive games have appealed to, this might appeal to you, because at least over the long haul in the core games, you can really have your whole family growing up, and you have married, and you have kids, and you can kind of keep going in multiple lifetimes through this, which is also very cool. All right, let's see what we've got here. Pendragon 6th edition rules preview. All right. Well, I'm glad not all the text is in this title font because while it's pretty, not quite easy to read. What follows is a summary of the core rules for Pendragon 6th edition. All right, it's great. Okay, so dice uses a 20-sided die for resolution, multiple 6-sided dice for damage. And then the value, the level of a statistic, e.g., a characteristic, skill, trait, or passion, is rated between 1 and 20. The higher the value, the better. Situational modifiers may increase or decrease the value of the statistic. So we're rolling d20s to resolve stuff. If we're doing damage, everything's in d6s. And then the ratings for stuff is all going to be between 1 and 20. Glory and honor. The object of the game is to collect glory, which comes from doing great and notable deeds. Honor is a measure of the character's integrity, which can rise and fall as they live up to the ideals, or cut corners for practicality. Character who loses too much honor is no longer considered a knight. All right, so there we go. Got a nice, and I always like this idea of glory and honor. We'll get more into when you see the attributes and other things. You'll start to really see the flavor because I really think they've embedded the flavor what they're trying to go for really in the core mechanics and how everything is in the game is expressed. Let's see, what are those notes? I do like the center column here with the notes. Glory always increases. Honor may increase or decrease. So glory is it's kind of like your experience. Okay, and in all tasks using a single 20-sided die. Got that. All right, resolution system, unopposed. Used when success is based entirely on the character's own actions. You roll a d20 versus the value of the statistic. If the statistic value is written as 20 plus x, and add the value of plus x to the die roll to determine its final result. The final number of the die roll is compared to the target value to determine the outcome. So critical success means you roll exactly the target value, and this often will confer some kind of additional benefit. Success is less than the target value, failure is higher than the target value, and a natural 20 is a fumble. Note that if a target value is 20, it becomes impossible to fumble, and that a modified die roll greater than 20 counts as a result of 20 and is a critical success. All right, so clearly stuff that is actually targeted 20 is you're just too good. Too good in the hood. And then if you're doing opposed tests, used when success is contested between two factors. Most combat rolls are opposed. Both opponents roll a d20 versus the relevant statistic, which is not always the same between the two, as with unopposed resolution, and then compare their outcomes as follows. Win if you score success or critical success and a higher final dice roll than the opponents. In combat, this means you hit your enemy. A tie, a success for both opponents that is exactly the same final dice roll, or both roll a critical success. The situation is unresolved for the moment, but additional effects such as damage or weapon breakage may be triggered. Mutual failure, both opponents fail, situation is unresolved. Partial success, there's success, but a lower final dice roll than the opponent's. A minor benefit may be gained. In combat, you are hit and suffer damage, but may gain protection from a shield or your weapon. And then loss, failure while the opponent succeeds. In combat, this means you are hit and suffer damage. And then finally, a fumble, the spectacular failure. Regardless of the opponent's result in combat, your weapon is dropped or broken. And here's a swig of lukewarm oolong tea for the working man. All right, so now we have. Now I'm sure I ran through those opposed rules. I'm sure I'd have to probably read through them again, but I think we get the gist of it, right? So the characteristics that quantify the character's physical attributes are size, which measures a character's relative height and weight compared to others. Size factors into how hard you hit with your weapon and how well you withstand blows. It is also the threshold value for determining knockdowns. Dexterity measures a character's agility and nimbleness. Dexterity keeps a character upright or on their horse when faced with the possibility of a knockdown, and determines the character's natural aptitude with many physical skills. Strength measures a character's physical power and their ability to exert force or pressure on an object. Factors into how much damage you deal out in combat. Constitution is health and vitality. Appeal is your natural charm, presence, and physical attractiveness. So I guess the main things to keep in mind is here you're looking at it and you're going, well, gee, this is kind of your normal sort of D&D-ish attribute setup, except for size. Because what we might normally look at in a D&D game is either just it's your strength or maybe your constitution for your height and weight kind of thing. I mean, obviously you would put down, oh, I'm weigh 200 pounds, whatever. But in terms of generally mechanically, we're never looking at the character's sheet and going, oh, how much do you weigh? Right. We would look at either strength or constitution in terms of that sort of sturdiness of character. And here we actually have a size attribute instead. But everything else is pretty much there. Notice there's no intelligence yet, but these are physical attributes. But so nothing, no mental or metaphysical traits, if you will. No intelligence rating. No characteristics cover quantifying intelligence or any form of cleverness or wisdom. Traits and passions are the measure of human emotions. Characteristics represent general attributes of the body. Skills measure specific and necessary cultural knowledge. Otherwise, characters know the minimum they need to function in their cultures and professions. When player knowledge is lacking, game masters should take a moment to explain things the character would naturally know as a person of their culture, time, and place. And I'm actually very fine with that. And I'm all for kind of getting rid of those because I don't think I think that they cause more confusion and just more everything that I feel like they offer. I would be happy, say, in kind of a D&D type game, say an OSR D&D game, instead of having intelligence, just roll for your roll for how many languages you know, and then wisdom is kind of your saving throw sort of things anyway. If you need to have some kind of faith thing for, I don't know if maybe belief is a better word or something for your religious characters, you can. But I'm all for it. And then a player can just say how smart or not smart they want to play and just do that. I never find myself really rolling against people's intelligence. If they come up with a plan, it's more like I can just walk them through the workflow, if you will, of their plan. And usually, if it's something where they're trying to build a grenade, but we're playing a fantasy game, usually it'll fall apart somewhere before I need to go. Okay, roll an intelligence check or something. Stochastic agency says that size is not just weight, but includes the concept of bulk and bulkiness. Yeah, I think size is a good term for that. Using traits and passions. Arranged in pairs of virtues and flaws, traits determine a character's personality and may affect their actions. The higher the trait value, the stronger the expression of that trait. Traits over 15 are considered famous and push the character towards acting in a manner consistent with that trait more often than not. Traits of 20 or greater are considered exalted and cause a character to act in a manner consistent with that trait at all times. Traits may be used to help guide or dictate character decisions, to pass a moral test, to provide in game hints, or to influence another character. General guidelines are provided in the nearby body boxed text, which I'm guessing is on the next page. I think usually I have the setup to give me the spread, but maybe it's not giving me the spread here in terms of the PDF view. Passions are used to give a bonus to skills or traits. They may be invoked when the object of the passion is in danger or seems to be, or when the character wishes to act in accordance with the passion. For example, love, parenthetically family, may be used when a member of the player knight's family is threatened. Each passion may only be called upon once per day with an unopposed roll, providing a bonus to a single skill or trait with the effects lasting until the end of the current situation or after an hour of time passes. Passions may also be used not for inspiration, but to decide a course of action consistent with the player knight's defined temperament or to resolve an inner conflict. So, what I like here is a lot of the game is about the struggle with you to either live up to or live down or move around your traits and your passions. And I think it's a really, again, having not played it, but having read it, it seems a really interesting sort of balance in that, as a player, I really want to do this thing. But then you're looking at it and you're looking at your knight or your knight, your character. That's not right. It's, oh, but if I do that, that's really this thing. And I'm not like that. So do I try to go against this trait I have to try to make it happen? Do I go the other way? What about these passions? Do I invoke this passion? Do I not? A lot of really, to me, it comes up with a lot of interesting decisions that can really go many ways. They're all based on this tug of war, this push and pull between you as a player and you wanting to do well in a certain situation with this character you have, and obviously how you have put them together and how they would be. And I think it's a really good kind of tension. This is not like, again, in an alignment type game where you think, oh, I want to do this. And the GM goes, no, 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 you can't because you're awful good. Instead, maybe as a GM, you might say, well, that's kind of cowardly. I think you're going to have to test your bravery stacks. You're usually a brave guy, and this is probably cowardly. So why don't you roll to see if you can if you can overcome your desire to be brave with running away like Sir Robin. Um, I think it's cool. I think it's really cool. I've always thought it was really cool. I don't know. I'm curious though with a lot of folks because I guess I'm curious with a lot of folks in the sort of D&D sphere how they would take with that because you are given these kind of things on your sheet that aren't just empowering. There are things that are limiters. Okay, I am supposed to be kind. Therefore I can't just go around killing everybody or jerking around every shopkeeper I meet because I'm supposed to be kind. And I know some folks don't like that. They just want things to work for them when they work for them and then we're not going to talk about it when they don't work for you. But this game really comes into its own when you're engaging with these things and playing it out and either rolling dice or living with the fact that, hey, man, I am kind. That is one of my things. So I have to be good to this person, even though me as the player, this guy's got the MacGuffin. I could just knock them over the head and take it. No, I can't. And what does it mean if I was a kind person and I do show this one weakness, even if I get away with it? What are the consequences of that? Terrence, you're not too late. Brave Sir Robin the Brave, he wouldn't run away. It's all preposterous. Exactly. Exactly. Let's see. So trait rolls in the game. Modifiers may be applied by the game master to reflect the demands or pressures of the situation. Normal traits may be rolled in any order the player wishes. Famous or exalted traits must always be rolled first, and an unmodified exalted trait never fails. So if you when you're doing these kind of rolls, if you get a critical, the character acts strongly in accordance with the trait and takes an experience check. The game master may grant a relevant +5 modifier to a subsequent skill or passion roll. If you have a regular success, the character acts in accordance with the trait. The game master awards an experience check only if the action is somehow significant to the story or the characters. If you fail, the player rolls again, this time for the opposing trait adjusted by any modifiers. If this roll is also a failure, the character acts however the player wishes. And then on a fumble, the character acts strongly in accordance with the opposing trait and gains a check to it. The game master may grant a relevant +5 modifier to a subsequent skill or passion. Now, the thing is that we'll see is you have these traits that are essentially in opposition to each other. So you have brave and I'll just say cowardly on the other side. You can't be both. So you'll have some value in brave, and then it's pretty much I think, and we'll see in a minute, but like say the remainder might be in cowardly. So if you have 15 in brave, you might have 5 in cowardly. And you're constant, and these things are sort of moving a little bit because you do get experience kind of will sort of help, and these decisions will sort of guide your stats. So if you're doing more brave stuff, you're going to get more potential checks, so your bravery will go up. If you have high bravery, but you start successfully engaging with a bunch of cowardly stuff, then maybe your bravery will decline and the other side will go up. So it gives this kind of nice ebb and flow, not super quickly, but over time with these traits. Most trait roll, let's see, did I call that? No, most trait rolls help in deciding a character's behavior. These are called decision rolls. Some circumstances, often relating to supernatural forces, require trait rolls because they are special tests of a moral or spiritual nature. These are called test rolls. The game master may prompt players by having them make trait rolls as a game hint roll, such as asking a player knight to make a suspicious roll. Finally, one character may try to influence another with a trait versus trait roll. Ooh. So Castic Agency says that most D&D players that they've encountered are put off by these. I wouldn't doubt it because I feel like the modern trend is nobody wants anything. Everyone I think wants to do what they want to do, and they want everything on their sheet to basically be a positive. I mean, granted, okay, you can have negative stats, but nothing limiting it. And that to me, I've always felt that the limitations that you put upon yourself, the actions you'll take, the actions you won't take, are really part of what make your character your character. What makes Batman Batman are not only the things he can do, but the things that he says he will not do. Same thing for a character like Spider-Man. And I think a lot of players, for whatever reason, in the modern sphere, don't want it. I mean, it's probably I would say maybe this has always been true because I think Pendragon's never been has always been a bit more of a niche game than D&D, and that's probably always been part of it. That you're playing these knights and you can't just go off willy-nilly doing whatever you want. I mean, you can try, but you're going to have these roles, and these roles are probably going to tend to say, nah, you're not going to do that. And a lot of folk are going to be like, well, I want to do what I want. But I really appreciate how that's part of the game. how can I succeed with this character? How can I take this character with these things and still kind of get to where I want to go, but living within these bounds that I've set? And that to me is a fun challenge and exercise and kind of brain burning puzzle of the game. But I understand why some folks are like, I don't want to do that. I just want to do whatever I want to do in the moment, and then I'll justify it, later. The passion roll. Passions often prove to be the source of great and lingering heartache for characters, triggering crises of belief and commitment. A failed or fumbled roll on the unopposed passion roll results is one way to trigger a passion crisis. Passion crisis may also occur when a character is inspired or impassioned and fails spectacularly at the task at hand. Your lord is killed while under your protection, or when it becomes clear that the source of the passion is no more. Saxon raiders murder your family, or the character will never have access to the source again. Your beloved banishes you from their sight. The game master must determine when such events may trigger a passion crisis. Regardless of the cause, a character suffering a passion crisis must make an unopposed roll against the passion that triggered the crisis, applying any of the modifiers given below to see if the character suffers an affliction. And we get a critical success. Success, it's madness. A regular success, it's melancholy. On a failure, there's no effect. On a fumble, you lose 1 point from the passion modifiers to the passion. And then let's see. And then these are some, I guess. Sorry. You lose 1 point from the passion, and then you have some modifiers on this. If the character failed their task while inspired, that's basically 0. If the knight has failed their task while impassioned, it's +5. If the knight is currently inspired by the passion, it's also +5. If the cause of the passion crisis is due to the character's own action or inaction, that's +10. And then if the character is currently impassioned by the passion, also +10. A lot of passion, a lot of passioning of the passion of the passion. Yes, passion. The duration of a melancholy or madness affliction depends upon the value of the character's unmodified passion as follows. All right, I'm gonna just skip over these. You can easily read over in their future, but I'm still untwisting my tongue from saying passion 10 times. Grizzalame, apologies if I butchered your name, says it's easily their favorite game, perfect for campaign play. It's definitely on the games that I would consider my favorite from reading it that I haven't had a chance to play yet. Hopefully, I'll be able to move this from the unplayed to played, but it's been one of the ones that's always just got my brain burning with ideas when I've read it. And I really do love the traits and passion stuff. I love. It just conceptually, I dig them. And I've been trying to figure out ways to get them into a lighter, more kind of OSR-ish framework for a long time. Maybe I'll get there someday. Then we have passion results. Okay, is that from the last page? Oh no, so we have passion results. You can be impassioned, inspired, melancholy, or maddened. Using skills. Skills are a way of assessing the success of actions that characters can attempt to do in the game. Actions like eating, walking, and talking are automatic and do not require skill rolls. I'm waiting for the game that's going to have you roll to eat. Oh, that would be quite a game. A roll is needed for skills only if they describe actions that hold an inherent chance of failure. A skill roll is needed when the action is a contest, when the character is under strain, is being watched by nobility, is trying to hide something, and so on. No knight or lady is expected to master all or even most of the possible skills. And then skills are listed alphabetically. Okay, we have 2 categories, skills and combat skills. For the purposes of these quick start rolls, game masters should use their best judgment in assessing which skills apply to which tasks. Griselme says, or Griselame, the butchery just hurts my brain to think that I'm butchering your name. If you can find players who are into the gameplay with the dynasty angle, you're in for a treat. Yeah, I think that's the key, right? I think if I was going to sell some folks on doing this long term, it would be the setting, because this is not a game that you can easily pull out into another setting. I mean, I wouldn't want to, but this game is really super embedded in this particular moment, which is this kind of Arthurian, sort of pseudo historical, legendary kind of time frame, place, everything. Not easy to pull it out and just dump it somewhere else. And then, like I mentioned, hey, your characters, there are going to be limits on things. You're going to have to play within these traits and passions. That's kind of part of the puzzle of the game. Learn to figure out the stuff and be open and willing to follow where these things lead and not always be dictating where they lead. And then I think, I would say potentially positively is, yeah, you're going to get a lot of domain dynasty sort of things, moving up the social ladder, moving up the political ladder, getting domains and managing them, and yeah, building a dynasty of sons and daughters and everything else, and lands and influence and all that fun stuff. Terrence says roll to eat is a table manners check. Oh, that could be. I could, Terrence, I could see that in certain circumstances. Yeah, having a table manners. But I wouldn't. But that would be less about if you fail, you actually don't eat. Then maybe you either you have good manners or not while you eat. We have combat skills, charge, sword, spear, hafted, two-handed hafted, brawling, and bow. We get into so he goes right. They go right into combat here, right? Did we miss? Oh, let's see. So let's see. I'm gonna skip over the notes, but you can do first aid, you can folklore, you have hunting, recognize, basically identifying stuff, and then the combat. The combat skills. Now into combat itself. The basic time measurement for a single or small group combat is the combat round. This is a short, elastic unit of time. Basically, the time required to conceive of and perform one action in melee. Combat rounds continue in succession until everyone is done fighting, either through incapacitation, death, surrender, or flight. The limit of one action per round means one type of action, not necessarily one unique physical movement per round. A knight's entire round of combat is not merely a single blow, but an exchange of attacks and parries, or perhaps maneuvering for an opening before striking a coup de main. So I think the nice thing they do here, which I wish that other games had done, was point out that and say explicitly, as opposed to what you tend to get is an implication, but this is explicit that you're not just taking one swing. So for the folks who get caught up on what this action means, is this one bit of melee is you doing all kinds of stuff that result in maybe striking a meaningful hit on your opponent or not. It's not like one shot. It's not like I saw there was this thing going on Reddit a while back where people were posting things of look how many hits I can make in 3 seconds or something. So like, why don't we get that? Kind of implying, well, why don't we get that many hits in combat in D&D? Well, the reason is because it's not really meant to be one hit, but kind of like one sequence of motions that result in then you roll the dice, success or a failure. But here they say it explicitly. So you can skip that part of the, well, what if my guy tries to do really 8 quick thrusts or something? It doesn't matter. Grisalame says that players have to accept the concept of failing forward. Arthurian knights fail all the time. Lancelot, Percival, Tristram, that's part of the genre, and failure leads to adventure, hence the dire effects for failing passion rolls, etc. Great story. Yes, I think that I think that's certainly true, and I mean I really think that should be pointed out, not just for this game, but pretty much for all the different games. Is embrace the fail state, and that's a problem that I think a lot of players and GMs have that gets surfaced in different ways. And the classic example is you're in the dungeon, there's a door and it's locked. You try to pick it and it doesn't open. And then, a lot of folks will say, well, the GM should never have put that door there because they need to get through the door and it doesn't lock. Like what happens? And that's valid to a point, but there's also another part where it's well, the party just has to go and get hammers or like go to like figure it out, go and come back, figure out another way. But we, especially nowadays, so get caught up in that there has to be this continual forward progress along a story session or along a session, that the idea of, well, we got to go back and figure it out or we got to do something else, like doesn't occur to people. But as was stated, sometimes those failures, maybe you then go get a hireling and then hireling comes and picks the lock for you and that becomes another angle. And then maybe the hireling becomes somebody in the town, or you got to go back to town and something else happens while you're on. Like it can create all these more interesting situations, but you do have to embrace the fact that, hey, failure isn't the end. So Classic Agency points out that D&D is not a simulation. No, I mean, none of these games are really hardcore simulations. Anyway, but yes, that is certainly true to remember, I think, in anything. There's like a hair on my camera. Okay. Combat round procedure. Step 1, you declare your combat actions. Step 2, you resolve them. Step 3, you do the winner's outcome. Step 4, the loser's outcome. And then step 5, combat movement. So you declare your actions. Everybody declares. In the first step, all player and game master combatants state what they intend to do this round, including the weapon they wield, if any. Targets and opponents are named. Timing is important. Combat declarations are made in ascending dexterity order so that the lowest dexterity declares first and the highest last. If important, resolve ties with opposed dexterity checks. Combatants within 1 yard of each other are automatically considered engaged and need not move to fight. Otherwise, movement must take place at the end of the round before combat can be resolved in subsequent rounds. So if movement's at the end, so it definitely behooves you to want to get into melee fast because otherwise it costs you a round. 2, resolve your combat actions. Any combat actions declared in the previous step are now resolved, starting with the characters with the highest dex if timing is important. If a skill or combat skill resolution is required for the action, it is made now. Generally, characters can either fight or move, but not both. Lance charges are an exception to this rule. Knights must both move and fight during a charge, and that resolution takes place now, including the combat movement. Anyone opposing a charging knight, even if on foot. So the one exception to the movement being last is if you're charging or countering a charge. Combat occurs, both combatants roll their respective modified combat skills using opposed resolution. The results leave a winner and a loser, a tie, or 2 losers. In addition, critical successes and fumbles grant bonuses and impose penalties, respectively. And then we have a bit on mounted charges. An effective charge requires a minimum distance of 6 yards between the character and opponent to build enough deadly speed and momentum. Character and opponent who are charging each other must start at least 12 yards apart. To execute this action, the characters must be riding a combat-trained horse and not engaged at the start of the combat round. Charge must aim at a specific opponent. Roll charge versus the opponent's action. Gain a +5 bonus if armed with a couched spear or lance. Let's see. Against anyone not also using a couched spear or lance, also executing a mounted charge action. Oof. And Grizzalami says, don't get in the way of a charging knight with a lance if you're a foot soldier. Yes. These rules you'll see for the charge, much more intricate than, say, just charging in D&D, which is, just run your full distance and hit somebody. But I think you can definitely start to get the gist that Grizzalami just said in the chat, which is you don't want to be a foot soldier against a charging mounted knight. You don't want to be there. And then we do the winner's outcome. The winner rolls a number of dice equal to their damage characteristic or their horse's damage characteristic if charging, modified by their weapon type if applicable. A critical success adds an additional +46 to the damage characteristic this round. The winner continues to step 5 combat movement. And then you have the loser's outcome. The loser takes damage from the winner and checks for knockdown, dropped, broken weapons, and armor, shield, and parry protection in that order. And then I'm going to skip over the particulars, but you can determine the knockdown. We have a nice picture of a fight going on. And then you can check for drop or broken weapons. You can look at armor, shield, and parry protection. And then you write down the damage. If the character's hit points drop to 0 or less, they are mortally wounded and will die if not rescued. And then if you're unconscious or dying, you're also considered debilitated. Major wounds occur when a character suffers a wound with a value greater than their con. Your con's going to be 1 to 20, and it seems like you're going to be able to get to that because, presumably a critical hit adds 46, which could get, so you can see how you could take a major wound. I'm not going to say super easily, but it's probably not that difficult. Okay. Healing. First aid may be tried, which was once per wound, restoring a number of hit points equal to the wounded character's healing rate, or double that with a critical success. On a fumble, the character loses 1d3 hit points instead and becomes debilitated. Oof, so there is a little bit of a risk if you're doing first aid. And now on to squires. Part of a knight's duty is to train young nobles at arms, courtesy, and other skills necessary to bear the title of knight. Squires graduate from the ranks of the pages around the age of 14 and are given into a knight's service. The purpose of this servant is to do all the labor necessary to make the character's life easier, such as tending horses, setting up camp, polishing armor, cooking, washing, and mending clothes, and to perform any odd jobs around the edges, such as helping to stand guard, sleeping by the door of their master or mistress's bedchamber, or bearing a message someplace. A Squire owns no steed of their own and no equipment other than the clothes on their back, a knife, a bowl, a spoon to eat with, and a blanket to sleep under. Knights must provide for them. Each squire deserves a name. Give them one. Salami says that it used to be double your usual number of d6 for a critical hit. In any case, combat in Pendragon is nasty, deadly, and healing is slow and hazardous. And then Terrence says, the true fantasy, having someone to do your chores. Indeed. Okay, so the squire's skills, I'm just going to go over briefly. You get first aid, you can bring you a new weapon, or they can bring you a fresh horse. And then you might have to, it might take several minutes for them to show up. So merely calling the squire does not instantly accomplish the desired action. You might have to wait. All right. Oh gosh, this title text. I mean, I like the font in terms of it looks like a kind of illuminated manuscript. But my gosh, that A in adventure and the V, it's not super easy to read. So this is the Adventure of the Sword Tournament from the year 510. All right, so obviously we're gonna spoil the heck out of this. So buckle up, folks. Here we go. This scenario involves the player knights in the journey of a nameless backcountry squire who quite unexpectedly finds himself carrying the weight of an entire realm on his shoulders. As ambitious, landless knights, the characters are presented with a golden opportunity to back the so-called boy king against the warlords who would crush him in their mad quest for power and earn his trust and patronage in return, as well as a spot in the household of one of his key allies. The Adventure of the Sword Tournament presents many opportunities for individual role playing and character development, but be aware that some scenes are intended to play out with little to no input from the player knights. Understand that these are intended to set up opportunities for later adventures or to give the player knights some insight into the nature of certain characters, the current political situation in Britain, or other details of the setting. Indulge your inner storyteller as you paint the scene for the player's imaginations, but do not linger. Move things along to the point where the player knights can begin making decisions once more. Use the early scenes in this adventure, such as the tournament melee and encounters in the city, to demonstrate the mechanics of the game for the players and impress upon them its at times brutal and unforgiving nature. The life of a knight is a life of conflicting duties and obligations. Remember that this is a game of consequences. Yes, indeed. Well, we know right off the hand there's going to be some moments where it's going to be a little cutscene where we're going to be sort of setting things up, and we would probably bide our players to be patient with this if they're antsy when we have to describe some things. But it's all the things we're going to be describing, and when they don't have a lot of input, or have supposed to give them either stuff for the future or stuff they can use immediately. But of course, we shouldn't linger too long in these moments. So indulge your storyteller, but be quick. Game Master advice. As Game Master, it is your job to present both the system and the world to your players. Keep in mind that this is a tutorial scenario meant not only to teach everyone the rules of the game, but also familiarize them with the world of King Arthur, which is often quite unlike our received understanding of medieval life as depicted in contemporary fiction, visual media, and other role-playing games. Because of the tutorial nature of the scenario, many broader outcomes are already fixed. By default, it is merely a question of measuring how and how well the player knights perform against these events. Do they rise to the challenge and come out hailed as heroes, or do they need other Game Master characters to come in and help clean up the mess they created? The fun of the tale is not so much in the destination as in the journey. However, there is nothing stopping you, the Game Master, from going off the suggested narrative in response to player action or your own tastes or interpretations. Your Pendragon may vary. King Arthur should always enjoy a level of plot immunity, but otherwise every other character in the saga is fair game, should you so wish it. Do not feel that the events described in the subsequent pages constrain you, but always keep in mind the primary function of these scenarios, having fun. It is up to each game master to decide how ruthless they wish to be, but remember, in the end, every knight dies. When he or she is gone, how will their family and posterity remember them? Indeed. So box text here on the sword protocol. To carry a sword at all times is the right and privilege of a knight, even at court as a status symbol. Even in a foreign court, the knight may do this, although sometimes hosts may ask them to disarm before entering a church, a king's hall, or some other special place. People visiting a city usually must disarm, but knights are exempt. This privilege does not extend to other arms, except for a knife or dagger, which is carried by everyone, as this is a tool as well as a weapon. All right, so as knights, you're going to get to carry around your blades with you, so don't worry about that. I think the other interesting thing is, which again I also liked, is I believe in the Great Pendragon campaign. think it's called the Big Fat Book, which I should have pulled out. It's somewhere. There are certain things that are kind of fixed, and it's kind of like there are these this big moments of history that are not really changing, but it's all the stuff you're doing kind of weaving through it, which I think is also kind of cool. Actually, it's kind of different from the we can change the world. It's like, well, no, you can't really change the world, but maybe you can shift it a bit. Maybe you can see how these events that you can't really necessarily prevent yourself, how you can get through them. How do you manage to survive these forces that are kind of bigger than you, if you so wish? Introduction. The year is 510, albeit just so, the 9th day of January to be precise. The cold, gray, leaden skies of winter mirror the mood of the land. None have worn the crown of Logris since the death of King Uther 15 years ago. The last High King of Britain, Uther's brother Aurelius Ambrosius, died 30 years ago. All of Britain suffers under the depredations of rapacious, ambitious barons and opportunistic raiders. The player knights are gathered in Londinium to attend a grand tournament, the first of its kind, shortly after the new year. Each of the pre-generated characters included in this adventure have a reason for coming, but everyone shares another motivation. This is bound to be one of the great events of their lives. For it is at this tournament that a new High King shall be appointed, or so the high nobility have said. Ian says, does it mention what happens if you do try and enter town with a weapon? Is it confiscated, peace bonded? Well, I think in our case, Ian, your knights, right? I think in this scenario, you're starting off as landless knights. So you as a knight will be able to keep your weapon and your knife or dagger, basically. So you don't have to worry. It doesn't say if anything's done. It doesn't say whether they're peace bonded or anything. So presumably it's just there. And I think the idea is, Ian, as a knight with your code of honor, blah, 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 you're not theoretically just going to whip it out in a moment's notice. Okay. What else do we need to know here? I'm just going to merchants and thieves mixed with the common masses, unwashed masses, amuse themselves with bohorts. I don't know what that is. Bear baiting and other martial games. The tournament itself is to be a grand melee, sort of mock battle fought with rebated, aka blunted weapons, which some praise while others dismissively mock. The player knights are free to move about the city as they will prior to the tournament. Assume they are spending the day sightseeing. Strolling the streets of Londinium inevitably takes them to the grand pile of St. Paul's Cathedral, a massive Roman basilica. In the courtyard outside is a remarkable sight, a sword driven into an iron anvil set atop a rock. The rock bears an inscription, but most of the player knights are illiterate and cannot read it. A successful unopposed literacy roll from Sir Avaloc deciphers the words. Otherwise, a successful intrigue roll recalls that it says something about whosoever pulls this sword from the stone is rightwise king of all Britain. Bruselmi says, striking or even killing someone while under the laws of hospitality is a big no-no. Yeah, so you're given this as a knight. You're given this honor and responsibility to be able to walk around with your weapon. This is an excellent opportunity to introduce the player knights to each other, have a bit of fun, so on and so forth. So you can do some sightseeing, and then we'll just kind of make sure you sort of maneuver around to at least get to see the sword in the stone, which is where? That's the White Tower. St. Paul's Cathedral's G. There it is. Over to there. At some other time or place in Londinium, the player knight with the highest spiritual trade value catches sight of a strange figure moving through the crowd, an aged, haggard-looking man in flowing, tattered robes, crazed twinkling in his eye. Surely it must be the magician Merlin. What is he doing here? Player knights who hear of Merlin's presence in the city may make a game hint roll against their trusting or suspicious traits with a -5/+5 reflexive modifier. So, for example, a player knight who normally has a trusting of 12 and suspicious of 8 rolls against those traits as if trusting is 7 and suspicious is 13. The modifier causes a suspicious trait to reach 16 or higher. They must roll suspicious first, otherwise roll trusting first. If the first rolled trait succeeds, do not roll the second. Award a check for a critical success. Also remember that a fumble for one trait counts as a critical success for the other trait. Those who succeed with their trusting roll have heard that Merlin is the last of the old druids. Though his ways are often inscrutable, he has Britain's best interests at heart. Those who succeed with suspicious have heard he is a literal spawn of the devil, And then it was through his machinations and schemes that good King Uther met his doom. So you see there, you get a nice idea of how these traits are working. So you see that, or you can whoever's got the highest spiritual trait value will see that, and then you're going to make this roll, and then the roll is kind of going to determine how you feel about it, and then you as the player get to kind of guide what you do about that, but kind of how you feel is sort of determined by your traits. Sasha, hey Sasha, says at this point Merlin's been missing for over a decade after he stole a baby. And he may have been a part of Uther's death. So suspicious is totally legit. Well, there you go. All right, I'm going to skip the box text on Londinium. We have a table of Londinium events. Once the player knights have had their fill of the city, they must retire to their tents on the tournament grounds and make ready for the following day's events. Should the player knights seek refreshment at one of the city's many alehouses, they may notice an aging hedge knight of little importance in the process of securing lodging upstairs. With him is what appears to be his newly knighted son, a proud-looking fellow who regards the player knights with a wary nod. Suddenly there is a commotion. A youth is scrabbling with an old beggar, bumping and jostling against the player knights. The row ends quickly as the beggar runs out the door. The young knight strides over. Oi! What's the meaning of all this? Disturbing these gentle folk? Gives the youth a soft cuff on the ear before turning to the player knights. My apologies for my squire. He's never been to a big city before and has obviously grown overexcited. Player knights may wish to make a decision roll of forgiving or vengeful. Those who succeed at forgiving may talk with the squire, who explains that he caught the beggar in the act of attempting to cut the money purse of one of the player knights. Quick check confirms that the purse is now dangling by a single loop, nearly cut away. If this is pointed out to the squire's knight, he looks suitably abashed. Ah, yes. Well done, Arthur, he nearly mutters. Then in a louder voice, come, we must unload the baggage. So there you go. You get a little hint of what's going on. And again, you're getting to see how these different traits are working out. You can go forgiving, you can go vengeful, depending on what you get, is your information is going to come back. The Tournament of the Sword. Oh, we do have this table of events. I'm going to skip over it, but they're there. The morning of the tournament. Okay, we get the tournament. The battles are run as a series of discrete encounters corresponding to the battle's turns. The longer the battle lasts, the more encounters the knights may fight. Although the player knights do not know it yet, this quote-unquote battle is fated to last but a single turn. That's fine. And then I'm going to sort of skip over the tournament melee procedure here. Just know that you can face either the Knights of Gore or Gore or the Knights of Lothian. Remember that passions may only be invoked once per day. Because the bonus lasts until the situation passes, each inspiration/impassion bonus expires at the end of the battle turn on which it was invoked. So that's something definitely to keep in mind. Your players can't just keep throwing their passions into the mix all the time. One per day. And probably something to mark down or have the players mark down. Great commotion. As the player knights are wrapping up their first encounter, some kind of tumult breaks out on the sidelines. Successful awareness rolls make out the sound of a young squire shouting at the edge of the field near Fleet Street. A critical success actually discerns the words, "The sword! He's drawn the sword!" Trumpets blare. The melee is over already. Already? A bit confused, the riders stop and look at each other. The squire yells again, "The sword! The sword!" Now everyone can hear it and sees the squire pointing frantically back towards St. Paul's. Some comprehending, others merely reacting. Knights everywhere turn their horses and start streaming in the indicated direction back into the city. The steeple of the cathedral is clearly visible over and beyond the old Roman walls. Player knights may look to their ersatz commander. Let's go, says the aging king without hesitation. He turns his horse and spurs it to gallop up Fleet Street. Ask for horsemanship rolls to follow him. A critical success puts the player knight at the king's side. A success right behind him. On a failure, the player knight is caught amongst the mingling horses trying to go the same way, while a fumble means the player knight is nearly crushed in the process, taking a d6 points of damage. Sasha says that passions are also risky. Failing one can put you out of play for a while, or fumbling, rather. And then Griselme says that, yes, but I think they toned it down a bit for 6th edition. It's still bad if you fail a passion roll. Yeah, we did. I think I might have sort of glossed over a little bit of that stuff just in terms of wanting to get through everything, the passion test. But yeah, I think that they can definitely go bad on you. So you want to be thoughtful about when you're invoking them. For sure. Okay, so we're gonna get down to the sword. Do-do-do. So if you make a successful roll, you're gonna see there's Merlin. He drew the sword. Who did? That lad there. Him? Impossible. Only the King of Britain can pull the sword. The Lord of Lothian leaps from his horse and pushes the boy aside. This thing is going to move. It'll move for me, he shouts and lays his hand upon the sword grip, tugging. And so we get the kind of, we get the scene of nobody can do it, then Arthur can do it. Let's see. Ask the player knights what they think of the action playing out in front of them. So this is one of those moments too, where in this bit scene, this time, right? The knights are all moving. The players are kind of watching the sword in the stone moment, which I think everyone is mostly going to be familiar with from different movies, books, everything, right? Okay, we're going to come. Excalibur, I always think about that one, and all the different knights come back to try, and then Arthur's able to just like slide it out, and they can't. And then of course battle lines start being drawn. As they're having their reactions, King Lot draws his own rebated sword and strikes towards the boy. His guards dismount and are a few steps behind him. Player knights who make it to the front of the crowd are now in position to intercept these experienced and brutal knights. All they need to do is flick their reins and guide their horses forward to block Lot's path. What will they do? If they do intervene when they are able to, grant them prudent checks as other knights of Cameliard move to intercept. Cameliard! I think that was Patrick Stewart, who plays one of the lords in Excalibur. I think is from Cameliard. I think I remember him screaming that out. Remember that only player knights in the front row have the option of intervening. King Lot is first surprised, then quickly outraged to be cut off by the knights, and without a word, slashes at one of them with his sword skill of 20 plus 3. Any player knight involved enjoys the +5/-5 height advantage from being mounted. Make an opposed attack action to determine the outcome. Lot's household moves forward to support him. This has suddenly become a fight against one of the toughest bands of knights in Britain. Fortunately, everyone is still using rebated blades. Run a single combat round using the statistics provided in the Knights of Lothian encounter, with weapons causing half damage as before. Describe how, during the chaos of the fight, one of the Royal Lothian guards slips past the player knights and leaps forward at the boy, who draws the blade out of the stone and cuts the knight dead in one smooth motion. Oof. Now King Leo de Grance and his knights, plus a half dozen other kings and many, many knights, swarm between King Lot and the heir apparent. The boy drew the sword, says King Leo de Grance. He is by right the king. No beardless boy shall ever be my king, shouts King Lot. Nor mine, says someone. Nor mine, come other voices. And then so on and so forth. And then comes down and finally, hail King Arthur. And then Grisalme says, yes, he is Leo de Grance of Cameliard, and Gabriel Byrne, which I remember, yes, the young Gabriel Byrne plays Uther, and Liam Neeson, Liam Neeson as Gawain. I mean, there's a lot of, look, Excalibur is one of my favorite films of all time. We see Liam Neeson's got this little top. I'm wondering he's got this kind of top ponytail look. He looks a bit of a goof, but I mean, and his character actually is a bit of a goof. Who's maybe only notable for ends up marrying Arthur's what's her name? Uh, Arthur's half sister. It's a great movie, and this moment, I mean, I feel like they could have just said, like, here's the link to YouTube. Just have the party watch this little video of Excalibur when he draws the sword from the stone, and just have that. And then you get to conclude, get some glory points. It's really interesting because it's almost like a real cliffhanger ending, right? Because I mean, I'd have to go back and read the Pendragon cycle to see what they have, how they have coming after. But I think back from the movie, it's basically this moment happens, and then it's basically the siege of one of the. Well, I think it's the camel yards under siege, right? And then Arthur goes with his Hector rather, and his knights to rescue. See, Solomon says, if you ever visit Ireland, great fun to visit all the places where they shot the movie. Oh, I've been to Ireland a couple times. My sister's in-laws, my sister married an Irishman, and I didn't even know that they filmed it there. Otherwise, I would have already tried to make that kind of trip. And let's see. So that's the conclusion. Do we have anything else coming out of there? We have some Knights of Gore or Gore, Knights of Lothian. Fight the enemy commander. And then we have Sir Avaloc or Avayok. I don't know how the L's are supposed to be. Sir Clarion, Dame Quenhild, Sir Evrain, Dame Tamura, and then we get the back. In the time of King Arthur, what kind of knight will you be? It is an age of chivalry, an age of adventure and fantasy. It is the age of Pendragon. The Adventure of the Sword tournament is a complete scenario and special preview of the rules for Pendragon 6th edition. Within, you'll find a ready-to-play scenario, allowing you and your players to partake in the epic moment when an unknown backcountry squire draws the sword from the stone. A rules overview covering traits, passions, skills, and combat, 5 pre-generated player knights, a primer on the city of Londinium, the setting for the scenario. Adventure awaits with Pendragon 6th edition. Huzzah! Well, there you go. It's a cool scenario. Now, if I would say there's maybe a weakness in the scenario, the players don't get to do much, right? You get to wander around. Maybe you notice Merlin, maybe you don't. You're going to fight in the tournament in that melee, which doesn't really. I mean, it doesn't really matter kind of what you do, right? It's kind of there to kind of whet your appetite, become comfortable. I was going to say whet your whistle, whet your appetite, get comfortable in the system, and then you just have the one kind of climactic moment, and then it's over. So on the one good hand is this is definitely something that, yeah, this is a single evening of play. Depending on what your party does, it actually could be over fairly quickly. Though, having not played Pendragon, I don't know about how long that combat would last, but I think it only goes one round. It's pretty quick, and then you just get the moment where the party gets to kind of witness, and then not make a huge impact, but get to kind of manipulate. Not even manipulate is not the right word. Just add some flavor, because the way the scenario is set up, if you're in the front row, which means that you succeeded on some rolls to kind of be nearby, you could be in that front area to intercept King Lot. If you happen to roll poorly or maybe you're not decisive and you end up in the back, you really are then really just watching the moment kind of unfold. But I think a lot of it's going to be, well, how do you get into it? Do you really embrace these different challenges and working with your traits and all this stuff? Like, how do you really kind of get the flavor from that? I would think if I was going to run this, I would want to have some other material. Maybe I would beef out a little bit of Londinium. Maybe I'd have it be multiple days of tourneys and maybe some different things. Maybe they come in early. They can have a chance. I'm not sure how I'd want to kind of maybe beef it out a little bit. Obviously, I haven't kind of played, tested, run it, so they might have better information than I do on how long it takes folks to come through. So it's a one shot. So the fact that's kind of on rails, not really a big deal because it's a one shot. It's kind of on rails. If I might want to give the players maybe a couple more sort of decision points, maybe work out the Merlin, maybe have a little bit more with Merlin, where they don't just see him from afar, but maybe a chance to actually go catch up to him and run some angle with Merlin, or maybe there's some other intrigue. I'm not sure. I might want to beef it up a little bit, but certainly in terms of just getting this out there and really just as a means of just getting people kind of starting to get them comfortable in the system, get an idea how combat works, get an idea how the traits and passions work, and having a couple of opportunities to use them, but you're not overloaded with using them. It's really kind of an ease you in sort of scenario. I think it works. Let's see. Griselmi says it's actually funny, I think, if you start playing during the earlier periods, maybe have your knight try the sword in the stone, and then when they are older, boom, Arthur comes around. That's interesting too. I mean, certainly if you wanted to run more of a campaign type thing and have it start early, I think you could certainly do that. But for this, it's kind of cool to be in that moment. And I think if your party likes it, if your players enjoy this, then I think there's going to be a lot of that cliffhanger part at the end where now Arthur's king, but there's all kinds of unknowns. Is great because it's really that like, oh, if they loved it, like, yeah, what are we going to do next? Right? What's going to be next? Maybe you're thinking of the movies. Oh, do we have to go? What's going to happen with these various forces that are now arraying on both sides of the boy king? So you do get this nice kind of cliffhanger in a good way of we resolved this little bit, but now, what are we going to do next? Which is cool. Maybe I want to give them a little bit more to do in this thing, but I'm cognizant of it's a one shot, it's kind of limited, and this is kind of a crunchy kind of system with lots of things going on. So just having some ways you can kind of play around with it without super high stakes in terms of the outcomes is probably a wise decision. And maybe on the one hand, I want to go, yeah, let's pull it out in these directions, but then I think there's probably some probably some wisdom in like, well, let's reel it in a little bit for this first time. Let's just see how you like it, see how you kind of get into it, and then if you want to, when we hit the end of it, we can schedule the next session and then figure out where we're going to go from there. Solomon says that Eric Volgaris has a great actual play series on YouTube. That's a great inspiration for the aspiring GM, King Arthur Pendragon GM. Yeah, I think I saw some of those a long while back. But yeah, I do remember those. Ian says one shots generally kind of have to be on rails, even diverging rails nonetheless. Yes, exactly. I think the one thing is here it feels just in reading it like a dungeon is, like, oh, we got to go through this dungeon, right? It's on rails, but you have a lot of decision points just in how you examine the dungeon. This one is mostly the way the scenario is kind of set up. You don't really even have that. It's just kind of like, yeah, you get to dally. We have a couple of points. I suppose you could really just flesh out the walking around Londinium. They did have Londinium events. You could again do more with that. So maybe I flesh out a little bit to give it more of a we're doing stuff before you just kind of get routed. Because once you get to the tournament, it's like, okay, you're going to fight a combat, then you kind of witness the scene and sort of you're done without having done a lot. But like I said, there is a lot going on in the game. So I can totally see why at the same time, like me, I'm thinking about it maybe in terms of it was like, oh no, it's our game. Like, oh, I think we just want more. But I'm also thinking to myself, yeah, but I'm trying to get used to this new system. Maybe my players are too. It's kind of a different system I'd be used to. And so it's good to kind of be a little bit easy and just get into the atmosphere and the story elements and that you're living in this moment. Like, oh, we're playing through this really cool moment in legend history or this legend of Arthur. Will be super fun. Let's see. We got some other comments in here. John Mustavoy asks or says, I wonder how setting lock do you feel the full rules of Pendragon are? I think that while running this would like to be very clear that the goal of the scenario is to be in the front row. And then Stochastic Agency replying to them says that when they ran the first session, they made it very clear what the intent of Pendragon is. This is a lockdown setting with explicit gameplay expectations. Yes. And then John also said that they made a challenge to themselves to write a sandbox one-shot. They think the trick to a successful one-shot isn't rails or non-rails dichotomy, but rather having a clear goal and time pressure, of course. Then the one-shotiness will become organic. I think you could probably run a one-shot, maybe hide the rail. I mean, there's always going to be some kind of rails because you theoretically a good one-shot. To me, a good one-shot is one where at least you feel like you made it to the end, whether you succeeded or you end up failing. I feel like you want to feel like you accomplished something. And so there has to be a clear goal. But even I would say having a clear goal is in some ways kind of a rails kind of moment because you are sort of the goal is here, and then you think it's to move across. Like it's not like it's not the absence right of a goal. It's a very clear goal. You're always gonna have something. I feel like I think if you're just like, well, you're in the town and this other thing is over here, and then I'm gonna kind of not really push you towards that thing. I'm just gonna kind of tell you. I think it would probably not be very successful, but I'd love to see because I know that for example at ShireCon when I played in Daniel from Bandits Keeps scenario, he had kind of an open world field to start. And what I would say is that the one thing with his scenario is that it starts off kind of just do whatever you want. And there was a lot of indecision of kind of like, what do we do? Do we just kind of goof off here, goof off there? And I think I remember one point saying, all right, I'm just going to go in a direction because I want to get moving. And then once we got moving, that kind of helped things. And I think that's where the rails part actually helps you is sometimes that indecision of what do we do? Or maybe the goal's not as clear as you think it is, kind of doesn't help. Rails can kind of. Hey, Diggs, welcome. Grizzalame says that the rules are pretty easy peasy once you run a session or two. Tone and atmosphere always a challenge, especially when coming from D&D. Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think that it's just a matter of getting used. I know even me I felt like maybe it didn't come across in how I spoke it, but as in reading it, they'll look all stumbling blocks from getting used to how they present things, like those plus/minus bonuses, depending on whether you're which side of the trait, kind of thing you're doing. But I think you probably get used to that pretty simply. But John, I would love to see your sandbox one shot kind of thing. I'm not gonna say it's impossible because nothing's impossible. Because might take some doing. but I'd be down for it. All right, folks. Any last thoughts before I close this one up? You can see in the show notes. This one's free on drive through. Easy peasy. So there's no reason not to go pick it up. Like with a lot of stuff, no reason not to go pick it up. They've got RuneQuest is 99 cents. Basic Fantasy RuneQuest starter set, I should say, 99 cents. Their Basic Fantasy Core rulebook also 99 cents. So go raid Chaosium on drive through and grab this, grab that, grab some other ones. I really wish more people were interested in this, or at least I don't know. I mean, obviously there's an audience, but this is one that I wish maybe had a more active community, but maybe I need to be the community that I want to see. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe I'll get a chance to run something. I do want to run or play or both in Pendragon. I need to try to make it happen. Maybe I just got to make that a goal for the next year or two to run Pendragon while I can or when I can. Terrence says that Watsy made another statement today. If I want to turn into a drama stream last minute, you know what? I'll save it, Terrence. I'm kind of burnt out on the OGL stuff right now. I think we all know where Watsy's coming from. I think we've all seen look. There's a big corporation doing big corporate things. I'm really people want to act all surprised and shocked and appalled, and I'm not, because this is what big corporations do. They do inhuman things because they are by nature inhuman, regardless of what our politics want to say about, oh, they're people that can vote and stuff. It's big corporations. And I put out my own kind of reaction sort of thing video. Everyone else has done that too, but now I feel like my stream or my feeds are all clogged with people continually going on about the OGL, and we know what they are going to. Oh, hey, John, thanks so much. Corporations are going to corporate, so talk with your wallet, or your pocket, your pocketbook. Don't spend money on D&D Beyond. Cancel your subs. Don't buy any new books from them right now. Don't put your stuff on D&D Beyond. Don't buy stuff from D&D Beyond, because unfortunately they get a big chunk of that, even if you're trying to support independent creators. Just do what you gotta do. But I will read it, and if there's something super interesting, maybe I'll do a video on it. But let's just play other games. Play Pendragon, please. Some of you folks who are pissed off on D&D and you want to play something that's maybe the tonal and opposite of D&D while still being in kind of the fantasy space, Pendragon. Quick start's free. Go get it, play it, enjoy it. Please, please, please. Look, guys, Agency says basic role playing is a great system in general. Yeah, I might do a read through of it, since now I bought it for 99 cents. So it can get better than that only by being free. I mean, it's crazy that they put it out so cheap. But we'll talk about it anyway. I'll be back theoretically tomorrow. Should be back there tomorrow, folks. If you came in late, which I see seems like I had some comings and goings, please go back to the beginning and watch the full talk through, since I am wrapping up. If you give a thumbs up on your way out or before you hit the rewind button, that'll be awesome. If you find yourself in here and not subscribe to the channel and you feel like subscribing, that would be awesome. Thanks, John, again for the contribution. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, night. Whenever you end up watching or listening to this, I'm gonna get my salute. Game on, and I will talk to you later. Bye now, everybody.